Okay, so this is now recording my screen and recording my voice. I told you guys pretty much 95% of the stuff that I do now are images that I find online, are images that I rip out of magazines and I scan. I wanted a picture of a little boy fighting a Godzilla. So I found this image of Godzilla, and I don't think I have the original. I don't know if I have the original one anymore. Let me see. It would be under images or downloads, maybe. Do what? Yeah, so this is the original. This was the original. It was out of a comic book. Two Godzillas fighting one another, an old school Godzilla and I guess a new school Godzilla fighting one another. And I wanted to replace this Godzilla with like a little boy that was, giving it his all. And so I found this picture of, and this is, I've manipulated a little bit of this, but not much. It was this Richie Rich when he was a boxer, I guess. And then I went in and I drew some smoke, and and I moved the, you grab the Godzilla's arm right here, and used the puppet warp tool and kind of moved it around. So it looked like it looked like it was more of the same image. So this is like a really rough thing that I put together in about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, not really adjusting too much, drawing a little bit of new smoke and moving the arm, coloring his hair. I didn't like him with blonde hair. There was too light over here. And then from there, I just threshold the thing. So to threshold something, because everything needs to be black and white. We can't have all of these shades and stuff in here. And the first thing that I try to do is to make a key plate. And the key plate is going to be my last layer that I can kind of color, just like when you're a child and you're coloring a coloring book. So I'm gonna threshold this layer and show you guys just how easy that is. You just come over to adjustments and threshold, and you get this, and then you can adjust this guy back and forth to the point where you're happy with it. And there's going to be 1,000 different ways you can do that. You can do that with levels. You can do that with curves. And probably get something really similar. There are times where maybe part of it is I like the Godzilla right there, but I like the little boy like over here. And so I'll have to cut the image in multiple pieces and threshold the Godzilla on one, and then threshold the little boy, and then just rebuild it again. But this is what I did, and I get this. I needed a border around, so I went in and I deleted some of the old stuff, and I made this border from just pen tool and the pencil, and just kind of making a mess around it. I'm going to go through now and I didn't save some of the layers, but I'm going to try my best to explain exactly what I did while I was putting this together. This blue layer, I decided to color everything except for the little boy. At first I was going to make him yellow and give him some shading on the cheeks and stuff and give him some shadow, and that was going to be the last thing that I was going to work on. But I wanted to take care of the color on the monster and the smoke first. So I have this blue, and you guys see when I zoom in, it's a bunch of dots. So it looks like there's a bunch of gradients on here. The way that I made this, I would open up something from textures. I don't know which one I used. I cannot remember. I'll say that I used this one. It looks like this one. And then I'm going to rotate this, and I'm going to get it to be the same size as the image that I'm working with. And if you guys that are constantly using Photoshop, if there's a different way that you do it, or if there's a faster way, or just like you don't, I do it differently, and if you want to share that, feel free to share that with me. So I'll find a texture that I like that's just got a bunch of gradients in them, and then I'll come over to image mode, grayscale, discard, and image mode, bitmap. Now this is how, if you have a photograph that you want to screen print a photograph of your grandmother or whatever, and you want it to look like a black and white photograph, this is how you would do that. So this is going to come up. By default, your method is going to be set to diffusion dither. So go down and just choose halftone screen, because what you're making is a halftone. A halftone is a series of dots that show a gradient. The input is 300 because I just made my image at 300 dpi, and the output is going to be 300. If for some reason the input says something other than 300, you guys should be working at 300 DPI. I'm going to say OK. And then this is where you have to kind of remember a few things. The angle, I'll show you guys how to do a CMYK print in a second. I don't really enjoy doing just solely a CMYK print because there's not really anything for me to do in it other than a technical execution of commands. But for times I can go in and I can just shade a building or the side of a sign or whatever, and I'll use a CMYK kind of thing for that. But if you're only going to do a gray image, like a black and white photograph, your angle should be 22.5. And what that means is the angle of the dots, like as they get created, they're going to be placed in different angles on like different patterns on the thing. If you're doing a CMYK print, you have to do 4 different patterns so that way all of your dots aren't stacked on top of one another. Does that make sense? Because you get all these different, yeah. I'll show you that later. If you're just doing a solely black and white print, 22.5 is what you're going to want. The frequency, that's going to be the density of the angles that you're using. So the higher this number, the more dense the halftone is going to be, and the lower the number, the less dense it's going to be, the bigger the dots. So if I were to put like a 3 in there, you get enormous dots. If I go back, image mode, bitmap, okay, and I put 27 in there, then it still looks relatively the same, and then I zoom in and I can tell that it's actually tiny black and white dots. So we have no gray on this image, it's just black and white, and this is exactly what we want to use. You may ask, like, well, why don't you just put 1,000 on there? Because at some point the mesh count of your screen cannot keep up with the tiny little dot. The way that you know that is if you take your mesh count and you divide it by 4.5, so like 180 divided by 4.5 is going to be something like 34, something like that. I'm guessing really quickly in my head. That's as high as you can go. So normally I would say stick in between 23 and 30 because the smaller the dots get, the harder the screen gets to clean. So this is 27, this looks pretty good. I'm going to drag this over here and I'm going to come back over to this image and I'm going to turn that off and I'll have this on. So if I want to shade something inside of here, I'm going to select the stuff that I want to be this kind of gradient blue, and to do that, and some of the stuff I'm going to do fairly sloppy while I'm showing you guys because it may take me 15 minutes and you don't want to sit and watch me go in and paint in individual pixels. That's boring. So I'll show you guys like fairly quickly of how I would do this, and then I'll just like the cook pulls the casserole out of the oven, we'll do that. So I'm just going to select the stuff that I would want to be blue with my wand tool. The computer's thinking about it. For some reason it's thinking really hard. And after I get everything that I want to be blue, I would just drag this selection over to this image. So now I have that, and you can kind of put it somewhere that you like. The image is way bigger than, yeah, there we go. So now you can find somewhere that you like. So now I've got a dark corner up here. I've got some light stuff in the middle. If I want it to be lighter, I could shift it over here. And then I'm just going to copy it or cut it. It doesn't really matter. I need to change it back to grayscale before I can do that. Okay, and now I can layer cut. So now I have that pattern. I can now drag this pattern over to the Godzilla. Did it drag? I can't tell. Yeah, it's just went underneath. So there it is. I'm going to close this. I don't need that anymore. Deselect this. So now I have this black and white pattern. And if I come up here and put it on multiply so that I can see through the black and white, or I can see through the white space, this is what that would look like. If I were to screen print this right now, I would have this kind of funky pattern. If I wanted this to be red, I normally just do it like a really Mickey Mouse way of doing it is paint bucket and turn contiguous off, and I just paint bucket that red, and then you can see like the alignment is a little bit shifted, and you can go in and do something like that. So this is what I did for the blue layer, and that's what I got. So this is the blue. I'm going to delete that red mess that I just made. Does that make sense? So I had a texture that I really liked. I half-toned that texture. I selected everything that I want it to be bluish with that texture, and then I drug it over there. Then there's other spots that I want to be a really dark blue. So like this right here, that blue is actually looks like that. But then on parts of his tail, it looks like a really light blue because of the halftone. So then I used the pen tool, and I went in and I drew some shade on his tail. I colored these things in, these stripes on his arm and his little horns and stuff. Let's see what this is. Okay, so I've got that. And now I'm going to go up here to, I wanted to have this, I stole this from your guy, Kevin, the little sunburst kind of thing. So I put the red sunburst. That's just, I just Googled sunburst, and then I drug it over, resized it and drug it over, and then colored it red. The one thing that's important with this is I do have it going underneath of the black a little bit, so like right there. You guys want to make sure that you do that. If you have a key plate, which is the black layer, and you can have your colors go underneath of the black a little bit, as opposed to lining up exactly with the edge of that black, because then if you don't get the registration 100% accurate, you have a white line right there. So now if I were to accidentally shift my red screen just a little bit, you see I don't get a white line between there, and you're going to thank yourself for that later. I wanted the gloves to be red, so I colored in the gloves. And then I also wanted some like red shading in the clouds to make it a little bit darker. And I just took my paintbrush. I grabbed went over here, grabbed the paintbrush. I made it fairly soft. And then I really enlarged it right here. I'll turn this red layer off and I'll show you guys what exactly I did. Turn the opacity down some, and then I just went in and kind of softly shaded some of the spots that I thought needed to be darker. And this isn't rocket science. You can erase this stuff later. So I do that for half an hour, whatever. And I actually did that on a new layer as opposed to what I was just doing on my black and white layer. That will be on a clean layer. And what I come up with is this. So you can see that there's a ton of gradients in there. What I will do with that now, I come over here to new, I open up an 18 by 24, and I do the exact same thing that I did before. I grab this red layer, and you see I named it delete because I want to delete that later. I drag this over, image mode, grayscale, flatten, discard, image mode, bitmap, 300, okay. Now here I could change my angle to something else, let's say 17, whatever, just so that way if any dots happen to line up, now they won't. And now you can see I've got tiny little black and white dots. Then I will drag this guy back over into the original drawing. There it is, close that, I no longer need it. And then you put that where it goes, somewhere around here, and I can paint bucket red onto that and change this layer to multiply so that I can see through it, and then you get something like this. So I've got two red layers on. That's the one that I just made. The one that I made the other day was that. And now when I turn the blue on, the blue and the red overlap and you get this look kind of like shading. And I'm going to delete the one that I just made. I don't need that anymore. And then I did the same thing with black. So I wanted to make it even darker, or with gray, I'm sorry. So I decided I'm going to have a gray layer, and I did the same thing with gray. So now I have blue, red, and gray making my smoke. And the gray, that's only the gray right there. And then I decided to put some gray inside of the Godzilla. And the gray inside the Godzilla was just a shape. I did a shape layer that took up only the Godzilla. And it looks like I missed a little piece right here, which I'll have to fix. So now I've got the black layer, which will be the last layer that I print. I've got this blue layer. That's also on the blue layer because one blue layer is halftone, one is just a solid blue. I've got the red, which is the shorts and part of the shading, and then I've got this gray, which is the gray and the color of the Godzilla. What's up here? This is delete also. So then I wanted to add some black dots in, and I did the same thing. I went in with my paintbrush and made that a little bit darker. And then I named that delete, so I'll delete it. And then I half-toned it, and that's what that looks like. What layer is this? Oh, and then I decided, do I like his hair? And then I gave him new hair, but I decided to stay with the black and white hair, or the solid black hair. So now over here, I've got all of these layers over here, and I need to figure out how do I go in and actually print my transparencies now. And at some point, like while I'm doing this, like I saved this. This was named Godzilla 2. Godzilla 1 was like the very start, and then I'll open up another one that I named Godzilla Layered, and I'll show you guys how I shrink my files. So that's the original thing. This is the white part is the piece of paper. So I'll make one white thing. So I try to imagine myself in the print studio with my bottom layer. My bottom layer is a white piece of paper, and then the first layer that I'm going to print is going to be this gray. So you can see there's solid gray, and then there's the halftone of the gray. And then next I'm going to print the blue on top of the gray. The blue is going to have an extender base, so it's going to be somewhat translucent, so that when the blue and the gray overlap, I get this color. When the blue is all by itself, I get a little bit lighter blue, and when the gray is by itself, I get a lighter gray. So now I've got a number of colors from two screens. Next color will be red. The red will also have extender base in it, or it'll be a process magenta. And then where that overlaps the blue, I get this kind of scratchy effect. Where it doesn't overlap the blue, it looks like that. The very last plate that I do, or the very last screen that I do, will be my key plate. So there's my key plate. And I went in and added a little bit of shading around his arms and stuff to kind of pull him into the foreground a little bit. So this looks a little bit different than the one. And I don't think I hadn't done that over there. But I think it pulls him forward by adding this shading over there. And I just added that to the black layer. So now my black layer is that. And each one of these things, this is what each screen will look like when I go down to the printer to do this. Now, before I go down to plot this off, I need to make these black. So whether you're working in vector or raster, it doesn't matter. If it's a vector, you can just double click on it and select black. Since this is a raster image, I'm just going to paint bucket, and this layer is good. That layer is good. See, that looks super dark, but it's going to be a transparent blue, so it won't really look like that. So now I have all of these layers overlapping one another, and these 4 layers are what I need to print on the plotter. So you can either make that in one file and just save it as a PDF, like something that's 36 inches wide by 48 inches tall, roughly, because this is 18 by 24, and then print it all in one piece, or you can print these things individually. You can do it however you want. But each one of those has to be printed individually to make the screen. Does that help explain like how I set up my layers and how I go in and make some of the things? Okay, fantastic. I'm going to show you guys how to do a CMYK print, because it seems that people really like doing them, even though I feel like it's such a technical thing. I need a photograph of a person. I'll use this guy. So here's a painting. If I wanted to print this, let's say we want to do it at something like 18 by 24. I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that. That's going to be the absolute first thing that I do. It's 18 by 23, and I'm working at 300 DPI. You say okay. Now this has a stamp on it. I guess I could get rid of that stamp with the heel brush, maybe. We'll see how good Adobe is. Or here, I'll just do it this way. And then I'll go in and we will separate this thing into channels. Build. Content aware. Look at that, not bad. Yeah, Google thinks it's smart by putting stamps on everything, but yeah, anybody with cheap software can remove that stuff. We're going to have to make this thing CMYK. It's probably going to be RGB. If I go up to mode, yeah, it's RGB because this came off of some website, so it makes sense that they would have it as RGB. I'm going to change it to CMYK. Don't worry about that warning. Yeah, the blacks changed a little bit. So what? If you need to do any adjusting to the image right now, do that. Like if you wanted to go in and change the brightness or the contrast or the hue saturation, you can do that now. Because afterwards you're not going to have the freedom to do it. If you want to resize it now. Once you go in and you separate these things, you can no longer do that. What I want to do now is, I can't remember my numbers. I think I'm going to have to Google it really quick. Sorry. But I'll show you guys how I remember things. CMYK, angles for screen printing. It knows that I Google this all the time. Okay, so yellow is going to be 0, black is going to be 45, cyan is going to be 15, magenta is going to be 75. So I go in here, I pick the cyan. Cyan is what angle? 15. Yes?
What's the point of having angles like that?
The point of having the angles, you're not going to see this on the YouTube tutorial. So if I decide to print my magenta first, my dots for my magenta show up like that, right? I'm zooming in really close. Does that make sense? Like I'm only focusing in on his foot right now. And so this is what we take a magnifying glass. That's what that looks like. And then I have to print my cyan. So my cyan dots, if I use the exact same angle, my cyan dots are going to do that. And they're going to be directly on top of my magenta dots. Now if I use a different angle, then they start doing this. And I start getting like a little bit of magenta, a little bit of red. And then when I do my yellow, the yellow ends up coming up over here. And so I get a much broader color as opposed to dots with white space around them. And it's still going to look, it'll still look like this, but you get these really bizarre patterns. And because of the way that all the dots sit on top of one another. So you want to change your dots up so that you can get true yellows and true reds and true blues. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. There's gonna be like a 2-minute lull in the YouTube thing, and people aren't here like, what the hell? Where did he go? So what I need to do is, since I'm going to halftone this, I need to open up a new file. So I'm just gonna say open or new, and then I'll open up another 18 by 24, and I can drag this layer right here. I may be able to just drag that over. Yeah. Review snap, and snap is on. And then I can halftone this, I think. So let me do this a little different. I'm going to do this different. I'm going to say new. And then let's go ahead and halftone this immediately. We'll say mode, grayscale, okay. Mode, bitmap, 300 dpi, halftone screen, okay. What was we'll put it at 26, something like that. What was the angle for, what was the cyan? 15? 15. So we'll make the angle 15. Say okay. And then we get a bunch of tiny dots. And I'll say mode, grayscale, because you have to change it back to grayscale. And I'm just going to drag this over here. So now I have one layer over there that is going to be my cyan layer. I'm going to come back over here to the original painting, go back before I did all of this stuff. Yeah. So now I'm there. Oh, actually I did the, yeah, now it's at CMYK, so it's before I halftoned it. Come back over, and then I'll switch to magenta. And you see it looks a little bit different. Image mode, bitmap, okay, 300, magenta is 75. Okay, make that back to grayscale because we need to move it. It won't let us move CMYK things. And I'm just going to stack that on top. That's good. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the yellow. And you see the yellow looks way different. Image mode, bitmap, okay, Okay. 90. Is that right? 90. Tiny little dots. And then I drag it over. Oh, I gotta make it grayscale. Okay. Drag it over. And I'll line these things up in a second. And then I do the black. Image mode. Grayscale. Oh, image mode. Bitmap. Okay. And then this is 45. So now all of my dots are they're making completely different patterns on the screen. And that's a bunch of tiny dots. Perfect. And change it to grayscale. Okay. You can put that over there. I'm just going to minimize this, and then I'll get these guys lined up. So this can stay the exact same because this is black. I'm going to come over here to layers. This is black. Turn that off. This is the yellow one. So over here, I can just, on my CMYK, I can just type in yellow 000100. Okay. And I'm going to put 100% yellow into the black. That got bright. Oh, and it didn't get that. Darn it. Okay. And now we'll see if, put this on multiply, and these things aren't quite lined up. So I'm going to move the yellow up a little bit. There we go. So now if I just did yellow and black, that's what it would look like. And then this was magenta. 0, 100. And you can kind of go in and play with the colors after you do this. If you don't want to use magenta, if you just want to like get funky, it's totally fine. You just need 4 channels. Put the yellow on multiply, and now I can see through all of them. They're kind of lined up. I think something happened up here. Maybe the red is off. There, it looks fuzzy. Yeah, so I didn't color something up there, or I didn't drag it over. And then I do the same thing with the very last one, except I put cyan. 0 and 100. Okay. And you go in and you color that. So now, this is my piece of paper. The first screen that I make is the cyan. The second screen that I make is the magenta. And I'm going to be able to see through this, so I put multiply. That's so far what it looks like. Then I put the yellow down, and then I put the black down. So 4 screens, and this is roughly what it would look like. And when I zoom in, you're going to see that it's a bunch of dots. So that's kind of what it looks like when you zoom in really close. I feel like I'll probably end up seeing a bunch of these things now that I actually taught you guys how to do it, because this is the first time I've sat down and taught people how to do this, but it seems like people enjoy it, so why not have you do it correctly and not struggle online doing it.
So you were saying that you're not the biggest fan because it's so technical?
It's
what part of it is exactly you're not the fan of the channel?
I think if I made that image, like if I were to go in and actually paint this image and like, you know, take colored pencils and make the analog painting and then screen print it, then I would be a huge fan of it. But I myself very rarely work in an analog manner. Like I don't sketch as much as, you know, I tell myself I should. And so everything that I make is digital. And so now when I do this, like I don't want to just rip a, right, I could just print it out. I mean, I guess we could do that with any damn thing we're going to make. And so at some point you guys have to justify to yourself, why am I going through all of this trouble? And I would be lying if I said that I don't occasionally ask myself. So far, you know, the trouble is winning out in my head of why I do it. But yeah, if I made the image, I would enjoy this. If I took the photograph, perhaps I would enjoy it. But if I took the photograph, like part of me like wants to print the photograph and not this. Now, if the thing that I ended up making with this, like I really like this painting. The thing that I ended up making with this, I actually half toned it black and white. I don't know where the hell it's at. But I did something else with it, and I kind of went in and added a chair to it. Maybe this is it. Nope, that's not it. That's just a bunch of some stupid graphic. I don't know where the image is at, but I ended up photoshopping out like what he was doing, and I photoshopped this like axonometric drawing of a chair into this thing, and I didn't put all the colors in the back, and then there was like neon shading in the chair. Then I put text all over it, and so I enjoy doing that. But just the CMYK print, I don't get anything out of it. That doesn't mean that you guys, if you guys enjoy it, do it. So those are the two Photoshop things that I really wanted to show you guys today, of just how I set something up and a few tricks of how I do shading and stuff. I know some of you guys probably have other questions, maybe. If so, toss them at me. Yeah.
I have thought about getting hand sketch on, I think it's called Triton paper.
Yep.
This very transparent paper.
Yep.
Could I use that or directly put it on the light table?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to ask how do you Photoshop that.
Like if I
You can, but you're going to have to expose it longer. Like if it's really super transparent, like vellum or something like that. Even vellum is a little bit. So you may find that you have to expose it a little bit longer, and then you can just do that manually. Like do it for the 2 minutes and 15 seconds, then do it for like another 15 and turn it off, or whatever, 30 seconds to turn it off. You're going to want to make sure that your drawing is in pen and dark, like in and that's you're totally fine that way. That way you can save money. You don't have to go in and scan the thing and then print it off on something else. Get the clearest substrate that you can, and
otherwise it just would take longer.
it's gonna take a lot longer, and then it's gonna take a lot longer, and then the light doesn't fully lock on all of the emulsion that you want to lock on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like
Okay.
a little bit experimental, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean I've done that. I've used tracing paper a bunch of times before. When you guys set up your own kind of bootleg print shops, if there's somebody in here that decides to do that, do not do this downstairs, please. You can just draw on 8.5 by 11 paper or any kind of like thin sketch paper, printer paper, and then you can take vegetable oil and rub on it. And the vegetable oil makes the paper like see-through. I don't know if you guys have ever done that. Like if you ever spilt oil on anything and then it becomes see-through, and then you can put that on the light table and put your screen on top, and it acts just like a transparency because the oil makes the. But I want you guys to imagine if you have 40 people in there pouring vegetable oil on the light table, of what that room is going to be like. A mess. So vegetable oil is banned, but if you guys are doing this somewhere else and you make your own light table, a lot of people would do that as a really cheap alternative to going off and buying transparencies and acetate. Who else has questions? Yes.
This is kind of a weird question, but what would you so for like fabric transmitting, what would the best be if regular fabric ink versus opaque?
I'm gonna stop this Camtasia thing, so nobody wants to hear